Good morning, Faris.
Good morning, Vijay. Good to see you.
You look rather tired today.
I'm exhausted, actually. Packing has taken a lot out of me, I have to admit, and getting ready to leave, yes.
How does it feel?
It feels very strange, I have to say. I mean, it's a question I will answer when I'm boarding the plane, but it's been 6 years, 6 wonderful years in Nepal, 4 years as country director, and before that 2 years as country manager. So it's a part of a lifetime, and it will be sad. I mean, I leave with a sense of humble accomplishment. I leave with a sense of gratitude, but I also leave with a sense of bittersweetness.
What time is your flight tomorrow?
2 a.m. 2 a.m., yeah.
That's middle of the night, or then
Yes.
very, very early morning, technically.
Exactly.
It's always joy to speak with a person who is leaving, Most of the time they are more honest and authentic when...
Well, thank you. I've always tried to be honest and authentic.
Yeah, that's something... maybe the nature of the bank is changing. The people are slightly more open than good old days, 20, 30 years back when I started my career.
It's a new bank. It's a new bank with very good people. It's full of very good people.
First, can you tell me honestly, how much does the persona of an individual affect the result of World Bank in Nepal
Yeah.
or any other country?
Yeah. Well, I think, I think the individual matters, but to an extent. I'm sitting here in front of you and representing the bank as a country director, the World Bank as a country director, but it's not just me. Behind me or next to me are wonderful teams in Nepal, a team, between World Bank staff and advisors and consultants of about 170 people.
So what level an individual can affect?
Well, the individual, if they're in a position of leadership, I assume, if they create the environment that allows the people, we are mostly Nepali staff who are fully dedicated to helping the country. If you create an ecosystem where they feel they are empowered to move forward, to lean forward, to take decisions, to take risks, I think it matters in that sense.
Does it make a difference if you are working as a World Bank country director in an underdeveloped country vis-a-vis a country which is slightly ahead in terms of economic growth, where the system is functioning more compared to Nepal?
Well, the World Bank itself takes on many, it's a big institution, of course, and it takes on many avatars. We have, for instance, where I was before in Malaysia, we don't provide lending to Malaysia, but we have a knowledge and research hub. We have the same in Singapore. So it's different in different countries, but wherever we're involved in supporting governments with sustainable development and, eradicating extreme poverty on a livable planet. Obviously, it's very important to have a counterpart with whom you can interact that has absorptive capacity, because the client, the government, always has to be in the lead.
If I ask you to compare the role of a World Bank country director in a country like Nepal vis-a-vis in Singapore, where the system is in place, the system is in much more place compared to Nepal.
Well, our role in Singapore is basically as a hub, or in Malaysia, where I was in Malaysia. We don't do lending, whether it's Singapore or Malaysia, but our role there is to help the country, because every country, wherever it is on the development path, is still developing. No country has reached its full potential or its aspirations. So in different places, the bank provides knowledge services, whether technical assistant, whether international best practice, whether sometimes they take the experience of Singapore and Malaysia and they share it with other countries. So even Singapore has development aspirations, and there we help with knowledge.
When you say that no country has reached its full potential, no country in the world?
Well, every country is dynamic, right? Time moves forward. So every country, you always have aspirations to move forward.
Can a country ever reach its full potential, or can a human being reach its full potential?
That's a question for the gods. But let me say that look where we are now. Look when we are now. We're in the time of the advent of artificial intelligence, where we manipulate ChatGPT, etc. And we're at the first stages of that. So with this leap, what is going to happen to the boundaries of human potential 10, 15 years down the road with artificial intelligence? So we're breaking new pathways, and potential unlocks itself.
That's a broad philosophical question.
Yeah.
I would like to bring you back to hardcore arithmetics like lending. You said that you don't have to do lending in Malaysia or Singapore for that matter.
Yes.
Why should a country like Nepal borrow money from World Bank or Asian Development Bank for that matter? Or from anybody else?
Yeah. Well, borrowing is important. A country has to conduct, I'll answer it at two levels. A country has to conduct fiscal policy, right? So a country has to, for instance, extract revenues or get revenues, but at the same time they have spending. Spending is sometimes on recurrent things, but also on capital budget, capital expenditures, big projects. Sometimes when you want to do that, as if you're investing in an addition to your house, you may want to borrow because borrowing is important for you to undertake this long 20, 30-year project. Now, you want to borrow where it's relatively cheaper to do so.
Exactly, that is the fundamental question.
Yeah, but beyond this, I would argue, and I cannot speak on behalf of our friends at the Asian Development Bank, but I can speak on behalf of the World Bank. And it's not the money, it's what the money brings with it. The money brings with it experiences from other countries, technical assistance, good practices in procurement, financial management, and safeguards. It's how the money is used that is important.
How the money is used and at what interest rate we have borrowed the money.
Yes.
That's a fundamental question.
Yes. Well, the World Bank, again, I won't speak on behalf of our friends in the ADB, but they have a similar situation. The resources of the bank that are available here, they're called IDA resources, International Development Association, and they're highly concessional. They're up to 38, 40 years with no interest rate, just a small service fee. So at the end of the day, it's equivalent to almost above a third a grant element. So when it's paid back, it's almost 2/3 paid back.
For a moment, I would like you to take hat off your World Bank office for a moment and just look at things for somebody who has been in Nepal, who spent 6 years in Nepal.
Yes.
If interest rates are too high or high, should Nepal borrow or no? What's your private opinion on that? This is a very fundamental question that comes when we are borrowing either from the multilateral agencies like World Bank, ADB, or the bilateral donors, different bilateral donors of Nepal.
Yeah, well, I do want to say, again, it's what the money is used for and what the money brings with it, the benefits versus the cost. You are making a decision to borrow. So what are the benefits? Do they exceed the cost which you can refer to as the interest rate at this time or the opportunity cost? As I said, the World Bank and the ADB, we actually don't have interest. They're actually very concessional, highly concessional financing. So it's almost, when it's paid back over 4 decades, almost 4 decades, they're paid back at the same rate. So it's almost with inflation, nothing there. But if you look at what is, the question I would ask is, what are you using the money for?
You worked here as a country director, not only in Nepal.
Yes.
You worked as a country director in Sri Lanka also. When we talk about borrowing, at what rate? What does the Sri Lankan experience tells us?
Yeah.
That the country shouldn't borrow just for the sake of borrowing?
Well, certainly a country should not borrow for the sake of borrowing. Borrowing is a natural process of any country. And also I work in Sri Lanka and I work in the Maldives as well. Borrowing for the sake of borrowing, as you said, is not healthy. But if you're borrowing for projects that yield a return to the economy, let's say you borrow and you build an airport, you build a port, and that port generates revenues that exceed the cost of borrowing. That would be a good idea, right? So issue is how you manage the borrowing, that you manage it based on economic returns and not political expediency, that you use it for projects and that you actually borrow and execute the projects.
There are discussions about the money we have borrowed for the Pokhara airport or the Sri Lankan government borrowing for the seaports and things like that, When you look in the hindsight, what would be your gentle suggestion to Nepalese government in days to come?
Yeah. Well, I think, let's talk about, it's a good question. Let's talk about Sri Lanka just very briefly, because I think that's an important experience. And I want to talk about it because Sri Lanka, I'm very happy to say, is making a turnaround. Only last week, they agreed with the official creditors for debt reprofiling, and that's very good news. In the case of Sri Lanka, it's a combination of 3 things: borrowing, revenue generation, and expenditures, how you spend. Sri Lanka at some point had some of the lowest tax to GDP of any country in the world. So rather than raising it to levels commensurate with the income level of that country, it went very low for political reasons. And as a result, they were not generating enough money, and then they were borrowing for a lot of projects which were not being executed. So it's a combination of things. And to go to your question on Nepal, I mean, the advice to Nepal continues to be, an important thing. Execution of investment projects is absolutely important. Balancing fiscal policy, revenue, spending, but also execution of the capital budget.
If I have to ask you to choose between execution of a project vis-a-vis the rate of interest that loan or the borrowing attaches, what would you prefer?
Well, look at it this way.
Maybe that's a political decision that how much risk I want to take.
Yeah. So even if you get a loan with the lowest rates, and again, the World Bank doesn't have interest rates on its loans in Nepal, right? We have zero interest rate. We just have a service fee. But let's say you have a loan with even the smallest interest rate, and you're borrowing that money for a project that doesn't execute. It still doesn't make sense. It's about execution.
I think it's the same thing like asking, I borrow from bank for my vehicle, for my car.
Yes.
Now in hindsight, sometime I have borrowed it for the good reasons because I could do, my mobility was increased.
Yes. And you can do your work.
Car I borrowed, I think that is not giving me any good result because I'm not using. Most of the time I feel lazy and don't drive around it.
Yeah. Or in some cases, you don't even go and pick up the car.
Yeah.
It's still in the parking lot.
Yeah. Okay. Coming back to World Bank in Nepal, how much does World Bank decisions make impact in the life of average Nepali people?
I'd like to say, leaving here, as you asked me earlier, what do I leave behind? What would I like to take with me in my mind and my heart? I would like to take the idea or the belief that at least some of our advice, some of our efforts made a difference in the life of Nepalis, right? The aspirations of the Nepali people are to achieve, as we talked in an earlier interview, self-realization in whatever form that takes for those people. To achieve that, they have to have some degree of development, whether it's human capital development, income, and they have to live on a livable planet and a livable country where the climate change adaptation and mitigation is there, where you have sustainability.
If you have to compare in a global scale, you have been an old-time World Bank boy now, right?
Yeah.
How well Nepal has done vis-a-vis the World Bank?
Well, it's not for me to say, it's not vis-a-vis the bank, it's how well has Nepal done as vis-a-vis its own aspirations. And I think, certainly looking back over the past 8 years, and you have to take this in a historical context. This is a country with a 2015 constitution that fundamentally transformed the country from a unitary economy and state to a federal democratic republic. And the first government came after that constitution, was in 2018. So it's been basically 6 years. That's nothing in the life of federalism evolution. Since then, there's been significant progress. Now, is there a distance to frontier? Could we do more in Nepal to attract foreign investment, private sector to execute projects, etc.? Absolutely. I think there's a lot of room for improvement.
If I reverse this question, when we talk about World Bank and Nepal, ultimately it's up to the Nepalese people,
Absolutely.
and the Nepalese government,
Yeah.
How much difference can a political leadership make in this country with a very fragile institution systems? How much can an individual change things in Nepal? I have seen a lot of political leaders coming, roaring like a tiger and living like a mouse.
Yeah. I think leadership is very important in any structure, whether it's government, whether it's an institution like the bank. We currently have a new leadership that's evolving the institution towards greater alignment with global priorities, etc. I think it makes a difference. Where I would frankly say is the biggest issue here is continuity of policies, continuity of economic direction, things of that sort. That's not necessarily only at the leadership level, but going down to the bureaucracy and having continuity in bureaucracy. I would argue, in all fairness, that constant turnover in bureaucracy is probably one of the constraints to Nepal reaching its full potential for its people.
Continuity in policy, when you use that term, we keep on changing ministers and the prime ministers at a very frequent intervals. Do the policy also change in Nepal, or only the ministers and the prime minister change?
Yeah.
More or less, this country is in the same policy. So how you can say that the continuity is not there?
It's obviously not for the World Bank to opine on changes in government, etc. This is a democratic republic. It's got its system and it's sovereign. So it's up to the people and the government to decide how they.
Well, I'm just asking you a philosophical question as somebody who has been working in the development field. There can be two kind of situations.
Yeah.
Or situation when government changes and so do the policies also.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm trying to
there is change.
play as a devil's advocate is that even if the government changes, more or less the economic policies remain the same.
No, they don't. They don't. On a Monday morning, at a practical level, on a daily level, they don't. We have the change. We have new staff. Even at the project level, imagine you invest, and it's not an investment for me, it's an investment for Nepal, in a project director, in a joint secretary, in a secretary, in them understanding, the requirements of international organizations, which is important. Again, it's not the World Bank in Nepal. Nepal is a member of the World Bank. Nepal sits on the board. Nepal is on the board of governors. Nepal is an owner of the World Bank, right? It's a cooperative. So imagine all that investment in international practices, etc. And then all of a sudden the official changes, and then you have to start again and again and again.
And again and again and again.
Yeah.
On an average, I think that during your 6 years tenure here in Nepal, you might have seen 12 secretary in Ministry of Water Resources, maybe?
Yeah. Yeah, there's been a changeover. There's been quite a bit of a changeover. And I'm sure that has an impact. That must have an impact.
Okay. Faris, please educate me about, there's a term called limitation. I don't subscribe the view of many who talk so big about Nepal can do this, Nepal can do that. I think we're cheating the average man in the street. There is a limitations that this country can grow, Can this country have a per capita income of $5,000 in next 10 years?
Why 5,000? Why not 4? Why not 6? Why not 8? Why not?
Oh, because 5 means that they are talking so big all the time. They usually give this magic numbers.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of numbers. I'm a big fan. Numbers are important. Obviously, we're economists and it's an economic institution. But to me, the aspiration, the question I ask, and it's a genuine one, is Nepal achieving its potential right now of what it can do, regardless of the number? And I think no, there's a lot more. Think of it this way. This is a country, it's a landlocked country. It's between two vast economies, which can provide tremendous benefit. They are providing, but they can provide more. This is a country with amazing amounts of hydroelectric potential. This is a country where it's the home of Everest, where it has vast tourism potential. It is the land that exports the Gurkhas and the wonderful Nepali labor. We can upskill them. So to me, 5,000, I never think of that number. I think, what is it we can do to unlock the potential of the growth? And to me, I never ask myself, what's the limit? But how can we unleash now growth? I would love to get to a point where we can worry about the limit.
Unlock the potential growth, right?
Yeah.
Can Nepal achieve its potential?
Yes.
What I'm arguing is that Nepal's much publicized potential is not that right. Probably we are exaggerating our potentials in real terms vis-a-vis the institutions and the abilities we have in this country.
Yeah, that I would argue with, because I think that takes, since we're talking, that takes a fatalist approach to development and to new institutions.
Currently, you can call it fatalist, or I will call it realistic.
I'm not sure. I think we should accept that there needs to be, there's a critical need for reform of basic institutional structural reform of the economy, private sector. I don't accept it as a given, as a constraint. To me, I don't see the constraint as something that's holding you back, but something you have to rip through critical reforms, through clear policies. Private sector. We're looking at private sector per annum of less than 1% of GDP.
I agree that reforms are needed. What I am disagreeing with you is, or playing as a devil's advocate is, this country's existing institutional capacities as quote unquote private sector. Whether this is a real private sector or the family-run business, that is a debatable issue. As of today, no country can reach its actual potential as long as it is not changing its institutions.
That we agree. I think we're saying the same thing. Let's remember what Singapore, you've seen Singapore, pictures of Singapore in the 50s and the 60s. And what Singapore is now. Now, Singapore is unique. It has unique characteristics. I'm not comparing. But there's a vast potential, and that comes from reform, from continuity of policy, from leadership, etc. So I agree with you, but I think we're not even at that level yet where we need to. Yeah.
Okay, since you have mentioned Singapore, this is again a very fashionable word in this country. Singapore and Korea.
Yeah.
Politicians, when they come to office, Singapore, Korea, kind of thing. Faris, what are the conditions under which countries like South Korea or the Singapore achieved exceptionally well, did exceptionally well in such a short period of time? Do you believe that Nepal also has such preconditions? People often forget the preconditions of the Singapore and South Korea.
Yes.
It's very fascinable to
Yes. And it's a unique story. It's a unique story with the East Asian miracle, with the flying geese model. You're right. Yeah.
Singapore and South Korea are exceptions. They are not rules.
Yes. In terms of the speed, in terms of the scale, perhaps they are. But you asked what are the preconditions for Nepal. Let's go back to Nepal. Preconditions are, and again, it's interesting. We have to be very, we have to be balanced in our approach, in the sense that I continue to be very sanguine and optimistic about Nepal. And I'm optimistic for a number of reasons. One, I know I've been here, I know the potential, but I've also been to the palikas, to the municipalities. There are some wonderful stories coming out of some municipalities. I don't want to name some, but I know some in the south where you go there, where they're equivalent to a municipality in the US in terms of services, in terms of ISO, in terms of a lot of things. So there are pockets of excellence. So the preconditions, I would say, one is policy continuity and a bureaucracy that remains dynamically stable to allow for the execution. That's one. Creating an ecosystem for the private sector to come and thrive in the country. And it's not a private sector of the existing private sector, but newcomers. You have wonderful talent and Nepali talent outside. Silicon Valley, or what was Silicon Valley, has tremendous amounts of Nepali talent. You have firms like Incessant Rain that are doing wonders in this country and exporting digital material outside, creating that ecosystem for them to thrive. And third is to allow federalism to continue to move forward, to have a clear line of sight on federalism. I think this is the hope of the country as well.
All I'm trying to share with you here is that I would rather like to be a cautious optimist than a blah, blah, unattainable.
Yeah. I agree.
Unattainable growth.
Yeah.
I think it's no good talking about unattainable growth in this country.
Yeah. To be honest, I think we're far from that discussion. We're far from the growth, achieving the limits of growth that is attainable for us to hypothesize about what is unattainable growth. There's still this much left of attainable growth that we can achieve.
Okay, you mentioned federalism, okay? How well do you think the federalism in Nepal is doing? What are your observations about it?
Look, I'm an American, right? And our federalism project is 300 years in the making, 3 centuries in the making. And yet, very, I would say, normally and healthily, so we're grappling with many of the issues of federalism even now. State rights versus etc. on a number of very critical issues, guns, schools, what is, happens in schools, etc. So I think it's a normal process. I myself am a believer that Nepal has made significant strides. Can I evaluate the success or the lack of success of federalism in a country after 7-8 years? Absolutely not. This is a fundamental transformation in the country. After a civil war, after an earthquake, and after massive floods, I think it's going in the right direction.
Federalism in America took many, many years and decades to grow. But you are living in this country at a time when the people are in such a great haste. They want everything to be next morning.
Yeah.
Right? They want to have a growth rate like China and the human right systems like England.
Yeah.
It does not work that way. So with such a, patience-less population.
So I think, Vijay, on this one, you and I are going to disagree a little bit. I think, I've always said this, I think lack of patience is a necessary prerequisite here for accountability of the civil service to provide basic services across the country and to provide development and jobs and livelihoods for the people. I think it's time for a level of impatience because it shows aspirations. This is a new generation and we've seen it playing out with the young Nepalis who are going outside. they're educated, they're on social media, they see the world outside, and they want a better life for themselves, and they are damn entitled to have it.
What is the difference between having patience and having aspirations, unrealistic aspirations?
Accountability. Holding accountable the providers of basic services, of education services, the providers of policy that allow for the private sector to flourish, for new entrants in the economy to actually have
something that Western societies took decades to achieve. Can Nepal achieve in just a few months or a few years?
Nepal has achieved a lot in its life. I think it can.
Okay, now you have hit the nail. Nepal has achieved in some areas, in some area we are lacking,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
But just by having aspiration will not give us result. This is something
Yeah.
I think in my free time,
Yeah. Well,
I might aspire for so many things,
Yes. If one...
It's a difference between wishful thinking and will to do things.
Yeah. So, being a very well-established journalist, and this is foraying into things I don't know much about, but in terms of the youth, their communications, their sort of expressed desires for new services, for opportunities in the country, I have a lot of full faith in the new generation, and I've seen it even in the 6 years that I've been here. I think how to actually communicate that, how to create systems of accountability are very important. And I really, really think, look, I always say this, federalism project, the palikas, the provinces, they're wet cement. The wet cement is still drying. And how they imprint themselves right now in terms of processes, in terms of allowing voice for citizens, will be hard at some point. It will become the structure of this country.
Oh, that's a beautiful word which you used, is wet cement, right? The palikas at the moment. I was not a great fan of federalism in the beginning, but during the COVID time and as the time is passing by, I can very safely say that they've done a wonderful job.
They have. I fully agree. Fully agree.
And as time will pass by, as the wet cement will set, things will be better.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure about this middle tier of federalism. There's a lot of discussions going on about a review on their rights and duties. Do you have anything to say?
I think in terms of the provinces, I think, this is something it's up to the people and the government of Nepal, mostly the people, to opine on. It depends on how you want to achieve it. There are different examples across the world. There are examples where provinces play a key role in terms of, like the states, like the Pradeshs, etc. The pros and cons, I wouldn't opine on. I would leave it on that. But I would say that federalism in general has been and could actually be critical to, if under the right policies and execution, could unlock growth in the country.
I think we should take a pause and review it coolly, with a positive mindset.
That's the sovereign right of the Nepali people.
Yeah. Because on the one hand, we are in such a great haste to develop things. While not improving our institutions. We have, right.
And you're still reconstructing. I mean, I wouldn't underestimate the devastation of the earthquake. I would say
if we want to increase the speed of the car which was delivered to me, probably I should sometime go to the garage and see whether the engine is functioning properly or not. Okay. Anyway, over the years, Nepal has made significant achievements in its living conditions. This much I can tell you very safely.
Yes, absolutely.
When I joined journalism, I could see people without any clothes.
Absolutely.
Or shoes. I was the first one to go to Karnali in the first vehicle that ever entered the Jumla, Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And the people were worshipping that vehicle.
Really?
Yeah.
What year was that?
That was 20 years back.
Oh, goodness.
20 years back, right? Yes. And I gave a ride to some kids, for the first time in their life. They wanted to touch it.
Oh, my goodness.
And an old man told me that he never believed that someday a vehicle would come to there. Right? From that day to this day, we have made definite headway.
Right.
We often fail to appreciate what we have done.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
But on the other hand, what is happening is aspirations are increasing so fast because of this digital revolution in the world. It is technically impossible for a country like Nepal to achieve those goals or fulfill the aspirations in this country. That's why so many young people are living. Don't you think that the rate of aspirations of Nepalese is slightly higher? What happened in America was that the aspirations, it took quite some time, They were growing slowly, right? In Jumla, from a young boy, from no road, no vehicle in his district, he hadn't seen a vehicle, to go to this level of this digital sophistication, the time span is only 20 years.
Yes.
In America, you took, I think, 200-300 years to achieve this aspirations.
Well, if you want to overlay that with a chart of the speed of the delta of progress with technological change from the Industrial Revolution from now, it would go like this, right? So it's hard to compare a history of a country pre-Industrial Revolution, then Industrial Revolution, then the Technological Revolution. The aspirations are changing. There was some research a few years ago, that said, as a result of technological change, 7 years from now, the jobs will don't exist even now. So I think it's healthy. And I want to say one thing. I mean, again, it's really important to capture some of the positive, wonderful stories of the country among the world. We compare the world. Nepal is a country that moved from 25 to 45% its forest cover, while countries are deforesting. Extreme poverty, absolute poverty went down to 3% from over 25% many years ago. Near universal vaccination with COVID and with elsewhere. There are a lot of stories, and they center around communities. You notice all the success stories here center around community mobilization. How can we tap into that community mobilization, overlay it on federalism, and trigger growth from the 7 corners of the country? There's a lot of promising stories here in the country, and I think it's worth...
That I will agree with you. I think we need a composite angle to look at things. What we have achieved,
yes,
and this exceptionally, probably unattainable aspirations, unattainable in a short given period of time. We need to find some sort of a balance between these two things. Let's have a positive. Let's be grateful to what have been achieved.
But I would argue, look, unattainable aspirations. We continue. I mean, at the ADB and the World Bank, we have this. We work very closely on a number of areas. One of them is provincial and local.
Okay, let's put it not unattainable,
but look at the roads.
Realistic, achievable. Okay, I will rephrase my word.
But is it not achievable and realistic for a village to expect that a road be in reasonable amount of time extended to them so the kids can go to their school? Is that unrealistic? Yet we don't have it yet, and we need to push forward more on these projects. I must admit, I'm a very stubborn optimist for Nepal, and I feel that the potential is vast.
Okay, I'll again rephrase this question. Although Nepal has made significant achievements in its living conditions in the last decades, Nepal has a mediocre performance in terms of growth rate.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
What are the factors that act as an absolute ceiling of growth in Nepal? Geopolitical factors, historic factor, democratic factor, political factor, or the cultural factor? Okay, now this answer will probably...
I say continuity of policy and continuity of bureaucracy that will help deliver some basic services, and the importance of policies that are critical for bringing in the private sector into this country. Those would be, to me, the most important.
One more thing. When we talk about growth, I'm again fascinated by this term called equitable growth.
Yeah.
I read somewhere that at this stage, at the beginning stage when the country is taking off, if you are looking for the equitable growth as well as the growth at the same time, probably you might end up nowhere. You will neither get the growth nor the equitable growth. Somebody said that if you want to have equality and the prosperity for the country at the same time, you might end up having nothing. First, let some people be rich, and then rest of the people will be rich. If you try to make everybody rich in the beginning, you will neither be rich nor be what you call achieving equitable growth. Do you have any comment?
I mean, look.
Do I talk like a Republican in America now?
I'm not going to comment. Look, I think I think it's neither here nor there. And I'm sorry I'm being very combative today, but I'm sort of challenging some of the questions. It's not an issue of everybody being rich. It's an issue of people, everybody. And I think this is a realistic entitlement, everybody being able to access the limits of their aspirations. And we know, we've talked about it, we've gone places together. Villagers, sometimes they want education for their kids, they want that. But if you look at the economy, Vijay, big potential for hydropower. Now, hydropower is not a labor-intensive one, but depending on how hydropower is done, it could have revenue sharing with the, benefit sharing with the people. 2/3, over 70% of labor in this country is in agriculture. Yet it's less than a third of GDP. Can't we engage in agricultural transformation by allowing for an ecosystem for agriculture that allows for these 70% to actually get greater benefits from that? So I think it's possible to do both.
Yeah, when you say that the essence of development is to let everybody achieve their potential, then we make some sort of a sense rather than talking about this percentage of growth or that.
I mean, how many Nepalis do I know and that you know and we know together that don't want to be rich? They just want to achieve self-realization and whatever that is for them. Education for their kids, freedom of choice of what to do with their lives. That in and of itself is important.
One thing about tax, this region, Nepal is having one of the highest tax vis-a-vis GDP ratios. Is that correct?
Not necessarily, no.
Taxes are high in Nepal?
I think the issue here is, whether it's a function of tax exemptions, things of that sort. It's a little bit more complicated than that.
Investment climate is not good in Nepal. That much I can tell you.
Yes, that we agree.
You agree?
I agree
If
that
you
it's
had
less
money,
the potential.
Would you invest in Nepal or India or Sri Lanka or Maldives? Not in Nepal, for sure.
Well, you're asking a country director for Nepal, Sri Lanka and Maldives. So naturally, I'm going to give you a very obvious answer.
Where you will invest?
I will invest in all three.
Give me a politically correct answer.
Look, where I would invest, I think here I would invest in the people. I would continue to focus on tourism and hydro and other. I think there's potential. But I think having the right policies.
As things are in Nepal today, this is not a great place to invest. I'm being ruthlessly frank with you. Recently, there was an investment summit. And one of my close friends from England came. So he texted me from the gate of Solti. He said that, Vijay, it has been 15 minutes. I'm still doing my registration to enter that hall. And I have some investment here. And my companies in Nepal are facing problem.
Yes.
And I am forced to say that the investment climate is good. And my ambassador, who is on the floor, is also clapping. We have also funded for this investment summit here. He knows, I know, and the policymakers know that compared to many places, investment climate is not up to the mark. We have many choices to go to many places, This is the hardcore reality. While totally agreeing with you, sympathizing with you about the great potentialities of Nepal, right? In reality, we are far away from the mark.
I mean, look, to defend our policymakers and our clients, this is why they had the investment summit. This is why they're trying to pass forward. I think there's a recognition, and I would agree with you. We are far from what we need to be here in terms of investment climate. We're on the same page. But this is why the investment summit was set up, to try to address some of these issues. There are ordinances that have been passed. We hope that those will be passed in Parliament, because ordinances after 2 months disappear, as you know, if they're not passed. So again, I go back, continuity of policies. The intent is there. The government, and we have been working with the government along with our partners in the UK and elsewhere, there's every intent to address this issue, but continuity, moving it through and making sure it's achieved is very realistic. But the intent is there. Remind me, if we have time later, I'll tell you my famous joke about the lion and the two villagers.
You can say it now.
Okay. Well, it's probably an old joke, but this is an important one. So there are two villagers in the forest, the savannah, and let's say the jungle here. And all of a sudden a tiger pops out and he growls at them. And then one of them just, goes down and starts praying. And the other one starts fixing his shoes and, stretching to run, etc. So the one villager turned to the next. He goes, "What are you doing? You can't possibly hope to outrun the tiger." And he goes, "I'm not trying to outrun the tiger. I'm trying to outrun you." So this is how you have to see the investment summit. It's how we are vis-a-vis others.
It sounds good, but in reality, it's a seven-signature country. one guy who had come for this investment summit, he told.
No, that's an issue. I agree. That's an issue. I mean, that's the issue.
And I asked him, compared to India, how many signatures you will have? He said that in India, there's only one signature.
Yeah, that's an issue. And obviously, that's an issue. I mean, from the get-go of this interview, I said addressing this issue of making it a investment-friendly ecosystem is absolutely important for this country. Even for tourism, even for agriculture.
It's one thing to be wishful and another thing to be somebody with a will to change it. Anyway, we'll move forward. What will happen if I reduce my expectations? Or if people reduce their expectations? Can expectations ever be reduced in any place? Aspirations?
Yeah. I don't know why one would want to do that. I don't understand why one would do that. Sorry, but I don't.
Say, for example, if I reduce my expectations or aspirations, that I will spend less, I will live more simple life.
Oh, I see what you're saying in an investment. Again, I continue to say that I think having clear expectations and a sense of accountability for policymakers is very important for Nepal. I don't, having been here, and I say this humbly, you're Nepali, Vijay, and an expert on the country. I don't know as much as you do. But I don't see that having been excessive aspirations here. I think people deserve to require what they require, and I think they need to get it fairly soon in terms of growth and development results. They deserve that, I think.
Nepalis deserve a better life than this, for sure, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, improvements. It's been massive. And look at we can't be negative. We have to rely on the facts. The fact is there has been tremendous progress. But we need to consolidate it.
We need to consolidate the progress, as well as we constantly need to remind our people that this country has achieved so much here.
Absolutely.
Just because that I have an iPhone and I see that American roads are like this, I can't complain that the Nepalese roads are not like America.
Yes.
There is a 300 years gap there.
Yeah. But you can say that I would like my roads to be better than they are. In some villages, palikas, you would say I would like to have a road in the first place because I want my kids, my daughter, my son to go to university. And I don't want to be encumbered by life.
I can say that my roads should be like America, but if I really start believing that my roads will be like American roads in a few months of time, or just 1 year, then I will end up depressed and frustrated.
Yes. However, when I've been to those villages, Vijay, I rarely hear that. I just hear, we need roads. I hear that, we need roads. And that's, to me, a very heartbreaking request, which I take for granted, going back to my home country.
Ambassador Liu Weil, a former U.S. ambassador, once made a remark that he said that when Nepali people talk about America, he said this to me in New York. He said that the Nepalese are fascinated by America's geography today without having any sense of American history, that how we came here. So it's one thing to aspire and another thing to get it done. This is all I'm trying to do.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Life is not a noun, it's a verb. Life is a noun and a verb, in your opinion. This question I ask everybody.
And my smart aleck response is it's an adjective.
Usually people fumble in this question here. Because the trouble here is that if you check English dictionary, life is defined as a noun.
Yes.
In reality, it is a verb.
Yeah.
Can you define how it's adjective?
Well, I think it's, again, I would say viewing it as a description of how you carry out certain things, how you make decisions, how you view the totality of a Nepali. To me, I don't subscribe to this issue of curtailing ambition. You and I have a respectful disagreement on that. I think insofar as we agree that there's a disconnect between the ambition and what's happening, I don't believe it's an issue of curtailing ambition, but unleashing and holding accountable that which delivers the aspirations of the people. And I think that's very important.
Slowly I'm being convinced by you.
Good, I'm glad. That's a first.
But it's taking some time. Faris, one question that comes to my mind, everybody gives examples of Singapore and Korea here.
Yeah.
Singapore, Korea, I know. But what they fail to take note, the political systems of these two countries, not very democratic.
No.
Well, in
Yeah.
Western definition.
Yes. Right.
We have a different kind of political system. I don't think that this political system can ever achieve that sort of economic growth among many other prerequisites that Korea and Singapore have.
There's substantial data and research and evidence that links growth and development with the strength of institutions. It's the strength of institutions. And I think we may need to separate the strength of institutions from political systems. I think that's very important. Look at, not to go into comparators, but I was making a point recently. We had this wonderfully managed event, which is the IDA-1 replenishment, the replenishment of the IDA-21 source of financing in the World Bank, and we had in Kathmandu. And I made the point that India, a few years ago, was a borrower from IDA, and now it's a contributor to IDA. Now you have a large neighborhood that in the south that has achieved tremendous amounts of progress and is now a contributor to the World Bank in terms of IDA. So I think there are stories. I would link it to strength of institutions and continuity within institutions. That is the link to growth.
The trouble here, the whole in your theory is that unless you have particular type of political leadership,
Yeah.
I wouldn't go as far as political system, it will not be able to create that institutions that you are looking for. First, the political system comes, that the institutions are the byproduct of a political system for some time to come here.
Yeah.
Because the Indians already had their institutions functioning since the British days.
Yes.
Look at the bureaucracy.
Yes.
The subsequent changes in government does not affect.
Yeah. So look at it this way. It's a good point. I would argue that in countries, I remember a while ago, I was working as in charge of a unit in Washington, and I remember in Belgium did not have a government for 18 months, I believe. I could be inaccurate, or 16 months. But the country functions. The country functioned in the absence of a government. They didn't have a unity government. Why? Institutions ensured the survival of services in the absence of the political structure. So I would argue that the strength of institutions are the protection against any variability in the political system.
I agree, but what I'm disagreeing with is that those institutions at some given point in history have to be created.
Yes, I agree. That you're right. Yes. There has to be a start, absolutely. And I think
political system, there's a politics that starts this. You should not.
Yeah. But you have the main, you have the main building blocks of doing that. For instance, just to give you one example, it's important, Vijay, the Civil Service Act, critical underpinning of the formation of institutions. Yet, I don't think it has not been passed. Things like that are necessary prerequisites to begin that journey of institutional build-up that you talk about. The Civil Service Act has not been passed, and I would argue this is a very important step for Nepal.
Yes, takes us back to the same thing which I'm saying. It is politics is the mother, institution is the child here.
Yeah. Yes, which later then takes care of the mother.
Yeah. We can, if you want to have a surfacial view, you can see that in India or in so many other countries, their bureaucracy is so strong, irrespective of the changes in the state and the central government. They have some sense of continuity there.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
But what you are forgetting is that the foundations for institutions were laid by the...
Yes.
They're very, very far-sighted.
Yes. And now is the time to build those institutions. Yeah. Absolutely, I agree.
Okay. What is your comment that Nepal wants to have a growth like China, Korea, or Singapore, and the human rights system like Britain? It doesn't work. That's what I'm saying. There has to be a trade-off.
I'm not sure there has to be a trade-off. There's a lot of countries that are growing that have those.
I think you already answered that question visiting institutions.
Yeah.
You worked here as a donor, principal donor. What are the mistakes that World Bank or other donors, Asian Development Bank or others have made in this country? Do you make mistakes? I hope you are.
We all make mistakes, yeah. So we're not a donor, we're a development partner. Remember, we have trust funds in the country. a development partner, and we do lending. Look, I think development in and of itself is a dynamic thing, as you know. It's a dynamic process. It's not a very clear science. It's an art as well as a social science. So we're always learning as we move forward, always learning. And we adapt. I speak for the World Bank, not on behalf of our friends at the ADB. But I think if I were to look at it and I were to speak on behalf of the institution, one thing I would have done differently is focus a little bit on holding back, making sure a project is ready, making sure there's clear buy-in across all the potential bureaucracies, and then I would move forward. I would have made haste slower, as they say in Latin, festina lente, right? Make haste slowly. I think waiting for the readiness of a project is very important, and making sure there's buy-in. That is, I would say, something I would have done.
Should Nepal accept all the offers you guys make in terms of loans and grants? Please have a habit of taking whatever that comes on the way. One once finance secretary was telling me that now he's no more a secretary there, that the trouble here, Vijay, is that if a donor comes with a tanker full of poison, he was using it as a metaphor. We will take it without examining what is inside there.
Well, I can't speak for others, but in terms of the World Bank, and this one I'll take the liberty of speaking on behalf of my our friends in the ADB, we cannot undertake a project unless we get a formal request from the government. It has to be a formal request from the government, after which we start preparing a project. So we are, we're bound by that. The question is, going back to the continuity, this goes to the question of things I would have done differently. There have been cases where we have gotten a request to do a project and do it in a certain way. We advance it to a very good point. We take it to the board, and then a new government comes and wants to fundamentally change it. So then is it taking a tanker full of poison, or is it taking a tanker full of oil or gold, but then somebody later deciding it's poison? So the issue of continuity becomes important.
My question was about, should a country like Nepal accept everything that is offered?
I think it should accept everything that's in its interests to do.
That is in its interest.
Absolutely.
Compared to Sri Lanka and Nepal, what do you see the difference in the government or the planning commission? What were your two basic differences in?
Well, I won't speak to the planning commission because we work with the ministries of finance or with whatever. Look, I think we have excellent relationships with both. We work very closely with both. Nepal, again, as I said, hosted recently the IRA 21 replenishment meeting as a testament to the strength of our relationships. But if you've seen Sri Lanka currently having 2 years ago gone through an unprecedented financial crisis in 73 years and is emerging with policies, the difference is continuity of the bureaucrats. Continuity of the bureaucrats. I say this unabashedly, continuity of the bureaucrats.
Easier to work in Sri Lanka for you?
There's more continuity. The person we started discussion with 2 years ago is the person we're finishing a project with.
In Sri Lanka?
Yes. Largely speaking. So important. And I make this point at the risk of being unpopular. This is the number one issue.
There's a very nice book, The Courage to be Disliked.
Yes. In that sense, I'm very courageous, I guess.
For the sake of larger interest. One more question. How do you ensure that your interventions are aligned with the needs and the priorities of the local community or the stakeholders?
Yes.
Do you sometimes push money where it is not needed, or where your money is not aligned with the actual need of?
So in the case of the World Bank, we have very clear, very pronounced environmental and safeguards framework policy. And that policy requires that we do consultations. Obviously, we do assessments of the environmental impact, and we do of the social impact. We have to consult with the communities. That's important. It's not often easy, and let's be honest, for all the communities to coalesce around a common voice. And often you have 90% who want to go and 10% don't want to know. And that becomes an issue where the government has to make a value judgment as well as the bank. It's not always perfect, but we have to. What's the point of doing development if the people don't want it? It doesn't make sense. There's no ownership.
I would like to give you one extra ball for this courage which you had earlier, courage to be disliked. Nepal suffers from a chronic policy uncertainty using this.
Yes.
government changes frequently, bureaucracy changes frequently. What kind of impact this really has in Nepal's relationship with the World Bank and other donors?
Good question. I want to compare Nepal with Nepal, right? Not with others in the sense of where it is now, where it can be. Our relationship, and I'm not just being politically correct, our relationship is extremely strong. And if you notice, we talk about continuity, etc. There is a continuity of relationship. We may have a discontinuity of policies, discontinuity of project, but the continuity of relationship you've seen. I've been here for 6 years, and the bank's engagement has been like this, very steady. And that's a testament to the relationship we have with the authorities across the spectrum. The relationship as a result of this has not changed. However, the impact of the projects that are fundamentally the Nepali people's money, loans through the World Bank, is severely mitigated. And also this has an impact on future access to projects. So I said the World Bank makes available concessional resources, highly concessional resources for Nepal, that it can borrow instead of going and borrowing at very expensive rates. The less we can execute, the less we have disbursement and impact, that will impact access to future resources.
Question about climate change, Nepal did nothing to bring this situation.
Yes.
And we are the one who will be facing the consequences.
Yeah.
Most.
It is true that many, that's an issue here of adaptation rather than mitigation. Let's use a very concrete example. Kathmandu, the Kathmandu Valley, okay? It's easy to say that, and I think it's true what you said, but it should not become an excuse not to take action in this country. Kathmandu Valley, as you know much more than me, is a bowl. And as a result, in the winter, there's inversion, and we have a lot of pollution. A lot of this pollution actually comes within Kathmandu Valley in terms of some of the issues related to transport policy, related to use of brick kilns, related to use. So there are things within our control and within our power that we can do.
Well said.
Yeah.
There are things that the India, China, or the America did to spoil the climate for us. But there are things that we did ourselves, like in Kathmandu, right? We should start working on them.
Yes,
right?
yes, absolutely.
Just waiting for others to take action.
There are things to do. The forestry aspect is very important. Yeah. And again, Nepal is a member of the international community, right? A member of the World Bank and the ADB, etc. So it has a voice in terms of future policies.
Nepal is going to suffer a lot because of what is happening in the Himalayas. We're responsible for the
It's a big issue.
melting of snow in Himalayas.
Yeah.
Are we?
So what I said once in an event, I said, it's not your fault, but it's your problem. So I think we need to focus on that. What is that impact on water flow for hydropower, for GLOFs, for things like that, for glacier floods and et cetera, things like
It's not your fault, but it's your problem, right?
Yes. I mean, in the sense that within it's
That world is very unfair, Faris.
our job, Vijay, you and I, is to make it as fair as possible.
After making unfair for others. What's your best experience in Nepal?
A lot of experiences, I have to say. My best experience as a person or as the World Bank?
As a World Bank.
Let me speak on behalf of where I've been most proud of the colleagues and the staff and the teams that we have here and in Washington, etc. I think they say, the stars are brightest when it's at the darkest. And I think the darkest period was during COVID. And the ability of the World Bank to support the government to bring in essential vaccines, working with our development partners, is an area that I feel very proud of in terms of what the bank did.
Your worst experience as a World Bank director?
Tomorrow when I leave.
No, in terms of disappointment as a World Bank director while you...
I would have liked to have more impact in certain areas, long-term areas, where I felt we spent a lot of time supporting policies and supporting specific projects where a change in the bureaucracy just completely upended things and really held back the services for the people.
You saw the worst crisis in Sri Lankan economy in recent times when you...
Yes.
And you also saw it coming out.
Yes.
Your experience in Sri Lanka?
Experience in Sri Lanka, it was really shocking to me 2 years ago, the extent to which this country, which has impressive growth trajectory, highest human capital indicators in South Asia, etc., went through a period of violence, tremendous violence. I grew up also in the Lebanese Civil War, and I started seeing the kernels of that violence. So it brought back a lot of memories and traumas for me. I think the fact that the way in which they coalesced and the leadership there just went, with an IMF program and went with continuous push towards policies and changes and reforms to move forward, I think was essential. And that allowed, again, the international community to band together. At that point, we engaged very early on with other development partners. We created this thing called the MDB Plus platform, coordinated very closely with India on bringing in fertilizers for rice paddies, etc. And as a result, among other things, and essential medicines, school feeding programs, a complete revamp of their social protection system. As a result of just that coordination with the ADB, with India, with the World Bank and with others, AIIB, to bring in the fertilizer, implied that despite the crisis in Sri Lanka, they never had a food insecurity problem with regard to rice paddy.
Situation in Sri Lanka at one point was very, very messy.
Yes.
You were the country director.
Yes.
And during your tenure, you also saw a day when it came out of it, right?
Yes.
How they are doing now?
They're doing well. They're doing very well. They continue with the IMF program. The growth is showing positive signs. Inflation has gone down considerably. They're accumulating reserves. They had a milestone historic agreement with the official creditors last week.
What's memory about Sri Lanka as a country director?
Seeing the suffering of our staff, because I saw it, because many of our staff needed essential medicines. They needed critical things that they were not able to see. To see that anxiety with my colleagues was quite painful.
Your best memory in Maldives as a country director?
My best memory in the Maldives. Wonderful people, wonderful place. Just the fact that we managed to, across elections and we managed to retain a very good relationship moving forward, and to see right now the efforts to do fundamental reforms, which are sorely needed in this country. And the fact that they've come to the World Bank and they said, we need your help, to me is the most wonderful thing.
Worst memory in Nepal as a person?
Worst memory? That you promised to take me to Jumla and Humla, and you never did. We never did that.
Who?
We promised to go together. We never did that.
Sanfoi.
There are some places that I always wanted to go and I never managed to go, although I went everywhere in this country.
I will add up that video I did when the first time I went. Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, exactly. But the time in COVID, I remember that time in COVID with the deaths. At some point, you remember there was a Guardian article that said that it was the real humanitarian disaster in the world, referring to Nepal. And I remember that. And I remember the smoke in the city because of the burning corpses, etc. It was heartbreaking, I have to say.
COVID time.
Yeah, COVID was a really dark time.
We often forget that we just came from such a difficult time, right?
Yes, we forget, yeah.
Why?
I guess that's the resilience of the human spirit, and thank God for that, This is why I have so much faith in Nepal. I mean, the resilience with the earthquakes, with the floods, with everything that's happened. And one very important thing, not to foray into political economy, you have to remember this is a post-conflict country. It's not a fragile state, but it's a post-conflict country. You had a civil war. The transition has been peaceful. Now, this is a fundamental success in this country. The ability to consolidate and sustain peace at the very organic level, I think, is a gift.
Yeah, this is a very vital point, A lot of us forget that we are a post-conflict country. One senior leader was telling me during the South Tower conversation, one of the top three, He was telling me that you often forgot, you all the time blame us. We are to be blamed for many things. But you forgot that Nepal managed to stop its conflict.
Yeah, absolutely.
Much quicker than so many
absolutely countries in the world. And to sustain its peace. That's not a small achievement. That's not a small achievement.
Nothing is more important in life than
Yeah.
You often forget that.
Well,
what is your best memory, personal memory?
in Nepal?
Yeah.
I think traveling to beautiful places and talking to beneficiaries, talking to the people. I continue to think Mustang is probably one of the most beautiful places on earth. And the memory that I had, remember, my kids grew up in this country, so I have an essential, unbreakable tie with this country, as does my family. So a lot of the memories revolve around the people.
You're going back tomorrow?
Yes.
2 a.m. in the morning.
2 a.m. in the morning.
Nepal has made you wiser?
Of course, definitely made me wiser, definitely. And I think made me more compassionate and made me more spiritual. And this is a gift that Nepal is giving me.
When will you be back?
I don't know, but it will be soon. I still have a couple of things on my bucket list that I have to do.
You have a safe flight back home.
Thank you so much.
And such
Thank
a joy
you.
to talk to you.
Thank you, my friend.
Namaste.
Thank you. Namaste. Thank you, brother. Thank you so much.
Amen.
God bless you. Thank you so much. Thank you.